I wanted to talk to you before we do the group process really briefly about what you do when you have such a, first of all, it's an extraordinarily beautiful book. How many of you have textbooks in your school that are more than 5 years old? How many of you have textbooks in your school actively in use that are more than 10 years old? How many of you are keenly aware that some of your textbooks are 20 years old and you don't have any indication of when those are going to be replaced? How many of you could say that the U.S. history and Montana history textbooks are key among those because the school board says, well, it's history, how much can it change, right? So it ends up literally at the back of the back of the back of the back in terms of replacement. That means that if your district, those of you who are using this book, made the investment in this text, we need to make an assumption that this text needs to last for 20 years within your system. But there are three things that I want to go through. First is, how do you make this last when you know that for students to deeply understand the text, they may actually need to annotate it? How many of you need to, when you were in college, actually highlighted things? How many of you wrote in margins? How many of you talked back to the author? All the time. I loved having arguments with the author. Did any of you, when you were in college, choose to buy intentionally, even when you had the money, choose to buy used textbooks? How many of you really love seeing what other people have written in the margin of a highly used textbook? I feel like I'm engaged in a conversation with somebody when I do that. I literally will pick, even when I go on Amazon now, I'll go used, horrible quality, lots of margin notes and ink, and I will choose that book because I'm really interested in what somebody who really cared about that topic had to say about it and who cared about it enough to mark it up. So we know that we can't mark these books up in our school setting. I want to talk to you about 4 or 5 different ways where you can support students in annotating and still use your hard copy of the textbook, and then other ways that you can supplement the utilization of the hard copy of the textbook by using the fantastic and extraordinarily thoughtfully done PDFs that are available on the Historical Society website. So related to this issue of annotation, you will note that I have a problem with office supplies. And a few of you may actually have seen me talk about this topic before. I'm going to talk about annotation tools and strategies that help you monitor students' reading comprehension. How do you know when a child is doing silent sustained reading that they are understanding the text? The eyes aren't just passing over it, but that they deeply understand. When I'm going into that unit on open range, I know what open range was as a concept. I know how it violated certain rules of carrying capacity on the land, that I have an awareness that it created a culture that still exists in Montana today that has all of these interesting ramifications in terms of how land is used. That's what I mean, deep understanding. So annotation can be a strategy for improving that deep understanding, but we have to have a way of understanding and knowing, a feedback mechanism for being able to figure out whether a child is getting it. I'm going to share with you mine. It's connected to, who did I loan the unit to? The Birch Bark House unit. Can I borrow it back? And if you ever want a detailed explanation, it's available on the Office of Public Instruction website. And what is going to come out of my mouth is written at the back of the unit. I have one who just taught this unit. She had a great experience with 5th grade students, working them through a novel. And we're going to be working with elements of this afternoon so that you get a sense of how to work them through text. But for this purpose, we're going to take a quick look at what the annotation tools are, and you'll note that they're not obviously in relation to this text, but they're in relation to this novel. So first thing I want you to know is the office supply store is your very best friend. And that these office supplies, particularly these little buggersome flags, these are really expensive. I am not opposed to having a slick library tape on the inside cover of even a hardback textbook like this, where I can have the Post-it notes and the flags in the book for the learner. I also have a variety of strategies for being able to have them available to children who have different reading abilities on their desk. But you've got to remember, a slick surface will allow it to be stuck and restuck and stuck and restuck and stuck and restuck and stuck. A rough surface, it will pick up just enough of the fiber that it loses its stickiness after a really short window of time. So these are the annotation tools that I standardly use, and you will note that they also involve the humble and also the bedazzled paper clip. The binder clip is in your packet for another reason. Sometimes you need to, and one of you mentioned this earlier, it might have been you, I can't remember. One of you mentioned needing to actually control their reading so that they're landing in a common place, so that you can carry on a conversation, so that you can have them write a prediction, so that you could have them write a hypothesis or a hunch, and you could move through the text in a manner. These are one of the tools that I use for that, as well as those binder clips to bind away certain portions of the text. So all of these are different tools, and I'll share with you basically how they are used. The first one I want you to have an awareness of is the clips are stop signs. Whether it be a paper clip or whether it be one of these alligator binder clips, it's a stop sign. Do not read what is within the clip. So when I'm working with a specific kind of text where I can actually bind it away, next week I'm working with this one. See my binder clips? I only wanted my students to read this chapter in its entirety, but I did not want them to explore yet the lessons here. So I've bound away what I don't want them to be reading. It means that the student who's reading the novel that has this incredibly suspenseful part says, "The bear ate him," in the middle of the room, and suddenly everyone knows how the chapter ends. And it keeps you from having that potential problem. It's a minor level of classroom control when you consider that you're allowing them lots and lots of opportunities to talk about what they're reading. And so it becomes this feature. So I have students post a stop sign. If I want them to end on page 34 at the top, they put their stop sign flag on page 34 before we begin the reading of that segment. And then we'll have these pauses to check for understanding in between each and every one of the segments. So the clips are stop signs generally. Don't read beyond.